Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into a topic that's been making waves lately: pro-natalist policies. You might have heard politicians talking about ways to boost birth rates, things like cash handouts for new parents, tax breaks, or even free childcare. It sounds nice on paper, right? Who doesn't want to support families? But here's the thing: these policies often don't work as planned, and they can come with some serious downsides. So let's break it down and talk about why letting the market and families handle things on their own might be the smarter move. First off, what are pro-natalist policies? They're government programs designed to encourage people to have more kids. The idea comes from this fear that populations are aging and there won't be enough young workers to support all the retirees. Fair concern, right? Countries like Japan and South Korea have been wrestling with super low birth rates for years, and they've thrown billions at the problem: tax breaks, maternity leave, even state sponsored dating events. Yeah, you heard that right, the government playing Cupid. But here's the kicker: most of these efforts have barely moved the needle. Japan's fertility rate is still way below what's needed to keep the population stable. South Korea's is even lower. So, what's going wrong? Let's look at a real world example: Hungary. Since 2011, Hungary's government, led by Viktor Orban, has gone all in on pronatalism. They've offered parents everything from cash payments to lifelong tax exemptions for mums with multiple kids. We're talking about policies that cost 5.5% of Hungary's GDP every year. That's a massive chunk of the budget, more than most countries will ever spend on their aging populations. And for for a while, it looked like it was working. Hungary's fertility rate went from 1.2 kids per woman in 2011 to 1.6 in 2018. Not bad, right? But then it started dipping again. Why? Because a lot of those extra births weren't new babies. It was just people having the same number of kids they planned to have, just sooner. The handouts didn't convince people to grow bigger families. They just sped up the timeline. And that's a problem when you're spending billions for a temporary bump. Now, some politicians, especially in the US and UK, are pushing their own versions of these policies. They're targeting working class families who have seen the biggest drop in birth rates over the years. In the US, there's talk of $5,000 handouts for new parents. In the UK, some folks want to scrap limits on benefits for families with more than two kids. The thinking is that poorer families are more likely to have kids if you give them financial incentives. And there's some truth to that. Fertility rates for younger, less educated women have fallen a lot since the 1980s, especially when it comes to unplanned pregnancies. But here's where it gets tricky. Just because you can nudge people to have more kids doesn't mean it's a good idea or that it's worth the cost. Let's talk money for a second. Pro-natalist policies are crazy expensive. Hungary's program is a perfect example. 5.5% of GDP is an insane amount to spend for results that aren't even sustainable. In other countries like Norway or Poland, they've tried similar things: subsidized childcare, generous maternity leave, tax breaks. But the data shows these policies mostly help professional women afford kids without derailing their careers. They don't actually convince people to have more kids than they already wanted. So you're spending a fortune to make life a bit easier for some families, which is great. but you're not solving the population problem you set out to fix. It's like buying a Ferrari to drive to the grocery store. Sure, you get there, but at what cost? And then there's the risk of perverse incentives. When you start throwing money at people to have kids, you might end up with unintended consequences. Take working class women, who these new policies are often aimed at. There's no solid evidence that they're having fewer kids than they actually want. So if you dangle cash in front of them to have more, you might be pushing them into decisions that don't align with their goals. Worse, you could undo some really positive trends. Over the past few decades, fewer teenage pregnancies and lower birth rates among young women have gone hand in hand with more girls staying in school and going to college. That's a huge win for their futures. Better education, better jobs, more opportunities. But if you make it financially tempting to have kids early, you might encourage some women to drop out of school or delay their careers. That's not just bad for them, it's bad for society as a whole. Another issue, these policies can get tangled up in some questionable motives. Some politicians aren't just worried about aging populations, they're pushing pro-natalism as a way to boost the native population over immigrants. It's no secret that certain leaders see higher birth rates as a way to reduce reliance on immigration, but focusing on one group's birth rates while ignoring the bigger picture, like, say, the benefits of a diverse workforce or the fact that immigrants often help support aging populations, feels short sighted. Plus, it's a risky bet to assume you can engineer a demographic shift without causing more problems than you solve. So, why is letting the market operate on its own a better idea? Because family planning is deeply personal. People decide how many kids to have based on their own circumstances, finances, career goals, relationships, you name it. When governments step in with heavy-handed policies, they're essentially trying to override those individual choices. But the data shows that doesn't work well. So people don't have kids just because you give them a check. They weigh the costs and benefits in their own lives. And honestly, that's how it should be. The state's job is to support families who need help, not to push them into having more kids for the sake of some demographic goal. Think about it, the drop in birth rates over the years hasn't been all bad. Fewer unplanned pregnancies mean more women are making deliberate choices about when and if to have kids. That's empowerment, not a crisis. And while aging populations are a challenge, there are other ways to tackle that, like improving productivity, encouraging immigration, or rethinking retirement systems. Throwing money at birth rates is like trying to fix a leaky roof with a sledgehammer. It's overkill and you might make things worse. So, what's the takeaway? Pro-natalist policies sound appealing, but they're often a bad deal. They cost a fortune, they don't deliver the results you want, and they can mess with people's lives in ways you didn't expect. Instead of trying to engineer a baby boom, governments should focus on creating a society where families can thrive on their own terms. Good schools, affordable housing, decent jobs. Let people decide for themselves how many kids they want. The market, meaning individual choices, not some free for all, has a way of sorting things out better than top down plans. All right, that's my take on pro-natalist policies. What do you think? Should governments be in the business of encouraging more babies? Or is this one of those things better left to families? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, hit that like button and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.